Have you ever wondered why some men find themselves doing things they never planned to, making decisions that don't feel like their own, or even falling for people who don't genuinely care for them? The strange part is they rarely notice it while it's happening. And when they finally do, it's usually too late. Welcome back, my beautiful people. Today, we're diving deep into a side of human psychology that many avoid talking about, how some women can control men without them even realizing it. Now, before we go further, let me be crystal clear. Not every woman does this, and this is not about labeling or blaming. What we're exploring today is the dark psychological mechanisms that can be used sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously to influence, manipulate, and even dominate another person's mind. This is about awareness. Because once you understand how these hidden strings work, you'll not only recognize when someone is trying to pull them, you also learn how to cut them before they wrap around you too tightly. So sit tight, stay with me until the very end, because what I'm about to share with you may completely change the way you see relationships, attraction, and human behavior. To truly understand how some women can control men without them realizing it, we first need to strip everything down to basics. At the heart of it, this isn't really about gender, it's about psychology. It's about how one person can gain influence over another person's decisions, emotions, and even identity, without them noticing. Think of the mind like a house. Most people live comfortably in the top floors. They see the windows, the doors, the rooms. That's the conscious mind. But beneath it lies the basement, the subconscious. That's where the real wiring of behavior happens, and that's where manipulation often takes root. Now, here's the catch. Men, like anyone, often believe they're operating from pure logic. They think they're choosing freely, making decisions rationally. But research in psychology shows that much of human behavior is driven not by logic, but by emotion. And if someone learns how to play with those emotions, they can control the choices without ever giving direct orders. This is where dark psychology comes into play. It's the art of bypassing logic and slipping into that subconscious basement, planting ideas that grow into decisions. And in relationships, influence doesn't always look like control. Sometimes it looks like charm, sometimes like attention, and sometimes like love itself. So, when a woman knows, consciously or unconsciously, how to trigger those emotional switches, she can guide a man's behavior, his loyalty, and even his sense of self, while he believes he's acting on his own free will. The danger isn't that he's being forced, it's that he feels free, when in reality, the strings are being pulled from the shadows. There are a handful of psychological levers that, when pulled skillfully, steer someone's behavior without them noticing the hand on the wheel. These aren't magic. They're repeatable patterns rooted in basic human needs: belonging, validation, safety, novelty, and meaning. A woman who understands these needs can craft interactions that subtly shift a man's priorities and identity, one small moment at a time. For clarity, imagine these as soft nudges rather than blunt commands: a look, a tone, a timed absence, a compliment, or a carefully placed question that makes him supply the answer she wants. One powerful lever is emotional calibration. By matching and then slightly amplifying a man's emotional state, she creates a feedback loop that feels intimate and validating. If he's anxious, a calm, soothing presence feels like rescue. If he's excited, mirroring that excitement binds in. This builds a dynamic where he comes to rely on her to stabilize or heighten his mood. Subtle dependency masked as connection. Another lever is scarcity disguised as value. Small withdrawals of attention, or unpredictable warmth, trigger the brain's reward system. Intermittent reinforcement, the same principle that makes slot machines addictive, makes the positive moments feel more valuable. He begins to chase them, invest more, and forgive more when they're inconsistent, because his brain overweights the rare rewards. Narrative control is less obvious but equally effective. People live inside stories about themselves. I'm a protector. I'm the funny one. I'm the rock. When someone helps rewrite a man's story by praising particular traits, assigning roles, or gently redirecting shame into pride, they alter how he sees himself. Once his identity shifts, his choices follow because people act to be consistent with their self-image. Guilt and obligation are classic levers, but in sophisticated hands they're applied indirectly. A woman might frame favors as shared burdens or use subtle reminders of past sacrifices to prime reciprocation. This doesn't look like manipulation to him. It looks like fairness, indebtedness, or simply what we do for each other. Over time, he gives more than he intended because he wants to live up to that mutual story. Information control is quieter but essential. She may manage what he knows about her motives, other relationships, or her own needs. By layering truth with omission, or selectively revealing vulnerabilities, she keeps him engaged without offering full transparency. This controlled ambiguity creates curiosity and effort. He wants to resolve the unknown. So he leans in and invests, finally. Social proof and environment matter. People are shaped by context, approval from friends, subtle signals of status, and public reinforcement can lock in private behaviors. Praise in front of peers, dressing to signal a particular role, or orchestrating situations where he is publicly appreciative. All these push his behavior into patterns that feel consensual and self-chosen. None of this needs cruelty to be effective. Many of these levers arise naturally. Sometimes they're conscious strategies, and sometimes they're learned survival habits. The ethical line is whether influence respects autonomy or erodes it. Understanding these levers is not an accusation, it's a map. Once you can name the moves, they lose their mystery and their power over you. One of the most fascinating aspects of dark psychology is that control rarely looks like control. In fact, it often feels like freedom. A man who is being subtly influenced doesn't walk around thinking, "I'm being manipulated." Instead, he often believes he's making his own decisions, guided purely by his own desires. That's the brilliance and the danger of these psychological tactics. Think about the last time you walked into a store, convinced you only wanted one thing, but you walked out with three. The clever layout of the store, the lighting, the placement of items, these were all carefully designed to nudge you without ever demanding that you buy. You still swiped your own card, right? That's the illusion of choice. When some women influence men, the same principle applies. She doesn't say, "Do this for me." Instead, she frames the situation so that doing it feels like his idea, his solution, his decision. Maybe she plants a seed in casual conversation, lets him water it with his imagination, and then later he acts on it, proud of his independence, never realizing the idea wasn't fully his to begin with. This illusion works because the ego craves autonomy. People want to feel free, respected, and self-directed. So if influence comes packaged as freedom, it bypasses resistance. He won't push back because, in his mind, there's nothing to push back against. He's in control. But here's the twist. Control through the illusion of choice is far more powerful than direct control. Why? Because direct commands create tension. People resist, they notice, they remember. But when someone feels they've chosen freely, they defend their choice, even if it wasn't truly theirs. In psychology, this is called cognitive dissonance reduction. The brain works hard to justify decisions, even manipulated ones, to protect the sense of autonomy. So a man who is being influenced in this way not only accepts the control, he often reinforces it, telling himself and others, "This is what I wanted." That's when subtle influence crosses into something deeper, long-term conditioning, and this is where relationships can become unbalanced. Because if one person believes they're steering, while the other is quietly holding the wheel. The imbalance of awareness means the controlled person keeps sinking deeper without realizing they have. In water, control rarely comes all at once. It's almost never a grand takeover. Instead, it happens gradually, piece by piece, step by step, until a man finds himself emotionally tied in ways he didn't even notice forming. That's the art of building dependence. And it's one of the most powerful tools in dark psychology. The first step is creating emotional contrast. Picture this. Moments of warmth, affection, or deep connection are followed by small withdrawals, less attention, subtle coldness, or delayed responses. This up and down rhythm conditions the brain to crave the high points because they stand out against the lows. Just like a gambler pulling a slot machine, he keeps investing in the relationship, hoping the next spin will give him the jackpot of closeness again. The second step is positioning as the emotional regulator. If she becomes the one who soothes him when he's anxious, excites him when he's bored, or comforts him when he's low, she positions herself as the central source of his emotional stability. Over time, he doesn't just enjoy her presence, he needs it, because without it, his world feels flat, incomplete, or even chaotic. Then comes identity reinforcement. By carefully rewarding certain behaviors with affection or approval, and subtly punishing others with distance or silence, she can sculpt his sense of self within the relationship. For example, if she praises him every time he steps up for her but grows cold when he prioritizes his own needs, he slowly shifts his identity toward pleasing her. He begins to believe that being a good man means aligning with her expectations. Another step: isolation disguised as intimacy. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be subtle suggestions that friends don't understand us, or framing family criticism as jealousy. Slowly, his world shrinks until she's at the center. And when that happens, she isn't just part of his emotional life, she becomes the entire ecosystem. Finally, the loop is sealed with unpredictability. Predictable rewards fade over time, but unpredictability keeps the brain hooked. By mixing affection with occasional withdrawal, she keeps him guessing. That uncertainty forces him to overthink, replay interactions, and double down on his efforts to win her back. What he doesn't realize is that the very unpredictability is what's binding him tighter. Each of these steps is small. None feel like manipulation in the moment, but together they weave a net strong enough to hold a man's emotions, his decisions, and sometimes even his sense of who he is. And once emotional dependence is built, breaking free isn't just difficult, it feels terrifying, because it means losing the person who has become both the problem and the solution. Words are far more than sounds. They are psychological tools that can shape reality, alter perception, and direct behavior without a single command being spoken. In dark psychology, language is never neutral. Every pause, every phrase, every carefully chosen word can become a lever of influence. The first weapon is framing. A woman who understands this doesn't argue head-on, she reshapes the way a situation is described, so the outcome feels predetermined. Instead of saying, "Do you want to help me?" she might say, "When you help me with this, we'll finish faster," and then relax. One word shifts the frame from choice to inevitability. He doesn't notice he's been guided, because the framing makes the path feel natural. The second weapon is loaded language. Words carry hidden emotional weight. For example, calling a small favor a sacrifice amplifies his sense of duty. Labeling him as strong or reliable primes him to act in line with that label. Over time, these labels become internalized identities, and he behaves in ways that match the language, not because he was told to, but because he believes he already is that person. Another subtle tool is the question trap. Instead of giving direct instructions, she asks questions that funnel his options toward her desired outcome. "Do you really think that's the best choice?" Plants doubt. Don T. You want to be the kind of man who protects the people he loves. Appeals to his self-image. He answers, but the answer has already been guided. Then comes silence as language, strategic pauses, delayed replies, or sudden withdrawal of communication create discomfort. Humans are wired to fill silence with meaning, usually self-blame. So, when she withdraws, he may rush to explain himself, apologize, or overcompensate just to restore harmony. The silence did all the work without a single word spoken. Finally, storytelling binds everything together. A shared narrative about their love, their struggles, or their future becomes the emotional glue. The story is repeated in subtle ways, inside jokes, references, reminders of what we've been through. Over time, he stops questioning the script because he is already playing his role in the movie she is directing. What makes language so effective is that it operates in plain sight. No hidden hypnosis, no obvious coercion, just conversations, questions, labels, silences, and stories. Yet behind those ordinary words lies extraordinary influence. He speaks, he listens, he responds, but the game has already been scripted. At the core of human behavior lies desire. It's not just about physical attraction, it's about the need for validation, intimacy, and the powerful biological drive to bond. When this drive is understood and strategically engaged, it becomes one of the strongest forms of subtle control. Desire begins with scarcity and anticipation. In psychology, what we can't easily have becomes more valuable. A woman who withholds just enough affection or intimacy while offering small tastes of it creates a hunger that keeps a man chasing. Each moment of closeness feels magnified because it's not guaranteed. This scarcity doesn't weaken attraction, it strengthens it, rewiring his brain to see her as rare and worth pursuing at almost any cost. Then comes validation through attraction. When a man feels desired, when he senses he is chosen, it strikes at one of the deepest human needs, to be wanted, a compliment at the right moment, an admiring look, or even a subtle hint that he is special compared to others. Builds a powerful bond. He doesn't just feel attracted, he feels significant, and significance is addictive. Sexual psychology adds another layer. Reward conditioning. Intimacy is one of the strongest reinforcers in the human brain. When moments of physical closeness are paired with approval, gratitude, or affection, they become deeply etched into memory. But when intimacy is occasionally withheld, especially after conflict, it can serve as both punishment and motivation. This push and pull dynamic doesn't feel manipulative to him. It feels like the natural rhythm of a passionate relationship. Yet behind it lies conditioning, teaching him to adjust behavior in order to earn closeness again. There's also the projection of fantasy. Attraction isn't just about who she is, it's about who he imagines she is. By reflecting his desires back at him, mirroring his ideals, aligning with his dreams, or embodying traits he secretly craves, she becomes not just a partner, but a fantasy. And people don't question fantasies, they surrender to them. Lastly, sexual exclusivity becomes leverage. If he believes she could choose anyone but chooses him, the value of her attention skyrockets. That belief alone can drive loyalty, jealousy, and even submission, because the fear of losing something rare can be stronger than the desire to keep something consistent. This is why desire is more than chemistry, it's psychology. It can be cultivated, magnified, and weaponized in subtle ways that bind a man's emotions to his attraction. And when attraction merges with dependence, the grip becomes incredibly difficult to break. If desire pulls a man closer, fear and insecurity keep him from leaving. And in dark psychology, the most powerful control doesn't just come from what a person gives, it comes from what they threaten to take away. The first layer is fear of loss. Subtle hints like, other men would treat me better, or, I don't know how long I can put up with this, plant seeds of insecurity. The man begins to overcompensate, terrified of losing her presence, her affection, or even the identity he has built around being with her. Then comes comparative insecurity, references to ex-partners, hypothetical admirers, or stories of men who do more or care better create a quiet pressure to measure up. He isn't ordered to change, he simply feels inadequate until he does. The comparison lingers, silently shaping his behavior long after the words were spoken. Another tactic is emotional unpredictability. When affection is sometimes replaced with coldness, silence, or sudden criticism, it destabilizes his emotional ground. Humans crave stability. So, when uncertainty dominates, the brain clings harder to the source of both comfort and pain. The paradox is powerful. The very person causing the instability becomes the person he seeks stability from. Fear also operates through self-doubt. By questioning his memory, exaggerating small flaws, or downplaying his successes, she can erode his confidence. This is sometimes called gaslighting. Over time, he stops trusting his own judgment, leaning more heavily on hers when he no longer feels certain of his own reality. He becomes easier to steer, but perhaps the deepest fear is the fear of abandonment. Humans are wired for connection, and rejection triggers survival instincts as old as humanity itself. A subtle threat of leaving even without words can be enough to make him bend, compromise, and give up pieces of himself just to keep her near. All of this operates under one rule: control. True fear doesn't always feel like fear. It feels like anxiety, overthinking, jealousy, insecurity. He doesn't realize these emotions are being engineered, or at least sustained, by the dynamic itself. He just feels compelled to do whatever it takes to restore peace. And so the cycle continues. Desire pulls him in, fear holds him there, and uncertainty ties the knots tighter. So, my beautiful people, here's the truth. Not all women use these tactics, and not every relationship hides these patterns. But when they are present, they can be devastating because the man rarely realizes he is caught in them until the control runs deep. The real purpose of understanding dark psychology isn't to point fingers, it's to protect yourself. Awareness is freedom. When you know how emotional dependence is built, how language shapes behavior, how desire can be weaponized, and how fear can be used as a leash, you stop being a passive participant in the game. You begin to see the patterns. You recognize when choice isn't really choice. You notice when your emotions are being pulled like strings on a puppet. And once you see the strings, you can cut them. Remember this: true love doesn't require manipulation. Real connection doesn't thrive on fear, insecurity, or hidden control. The moment you feel more bound than free, more anxious than loved, it's a sign to step back and ask yourself, am I choosing, or am I being chosen for? Thank you for staying with me through this deep dive into the shadows of the mind. If this opened your eyes, make sure you share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more content like this, dark psychology explained in a way that is clear and powerful, hit that subscribe button and join me on this journey. Until next time, take care of your mind, protect your freedom, and as always, stay aware.